Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 13th, and we have more important updates from the protests, from what is going on in Iran. Breaking news just now, a few minutes ago, President Trump tweeted the following: Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way. MIGA, make Iran great again, President Donald J. Trump. Help is on its way. And this fits in with what we've been talking about, where, as I said in one of my earlier updates, that President Trump has doubled down by mentioning Obama making threats and not making good on them, and what he said on Air Force One about how we may have to attack before negotiating. This also signals that he's moving in that direction. So that is a huge, huge update. And all eyes, of course, are on President Trump. But there's a whole lot more going on in Iran besides this tweet. So just to lay the groundwork for it, let's go through some of the big stories. One of the big developments is that the Iranian regime has announced that they will be executing a young man who was one of the protesters. Here's the headline in Fox News: Iran set to hang protesters in what would mark first execution tied to anti-regime demonstrations. The protester is 26 years old. His name is Efran Soltani, and there are human rights groups from Iran, the human rights groups Iran Human Rights and National Union for Democracy, that are calling on the world to intervene to save him from being killed. And this would be, of course, a crime against humanity. The crime that he is being charged with is waging war against God, which is a crime that is punishable by death in Iran. And this has only increased the calls for the U.S. to intervene. We've mentioned many times that President Trump has warned the Iranians that deadly violence against the protesters would result in a U.S. military response. But there's also been leaks. There's been reports coming out from Washington over the last day that Vice President J.D. Vance and the people around him are pressuring President Trump not to take military action. We also know that the Qataris, not surprising, are also pressuring President Trump not to take military action, while others are pressuring him to take military action. And in this particular situation, I really believe it is immoral and misguided to go into negotiations. Because what are you going to negotiate? You want to throw a lifeline to the regime so that they don't fall and you can come to some sort of accommodation so they don't have nuclear weapons but continue to oppress their people? That would be a disaster. And of course, President Trump already gave his ultimatums. One of the loudest voices arguing against American intervention is, as usual, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. And at the end of this quote that I'm going to read to you, he says something that really speaks to the misunderstanding that so many people in the West have about Iran. So here's his quote: "We wish them the best. We wish freedom and liberation the best across the world, but I don't think it's the job of the American government to be involved with every freedom movement around the world. If you bomb the government, do you then rally the people to their flag who are upset with the Ayatollah, but then say, well, gosh, we can't have a foreign government invading or bombing our country? It tends to have people rally to the cause." Now, this is an interesting piece of logic. If only it were true. It's just not true. The Iranian people, and I've mentioned this in some previous updates, the Iranian people are very anti the regime. There is a tremendous disconnect between them and then the regime. And the Iranian people have been asking for the Western nations to intervene during the 12-day war with Israel. The Iranian people were actually cheering on the Israelis, and which sounds a little crazy to people. They were cheering on the Israelis because they want their regime to fall. They are anti their regime. There is no indication that this fear-mongering that if America steps in or Israel steps in, it'll rally people around the regime that they're trying to topple, have any credibility at all. But this is what Rand Paul is saying. Rand Paul is always against American intervention everywhere. But there's a fascinating interview from when he was still a senator, who's currently Vice President Rubio gave, where he really shows a clarity on this exact point that I want to share with you. Let's go to that video now, and then I'll say something about it when we come back.
The Iranian regime tomorrow said, look, we're going to stop trying to become the regional power. We're going to stop our nuclear weapons. We're going to stop sponsoring terrorism. We're going to stop trying to kill you, which is what they're trying to do with Donald Trump. We're going to stop all of these things. Theoretically, yeah, of course you could work something like that out. That's just, I think, unlikely, because that's the very driving mission and purpose of the regime. I think one of the things he says in that statement, which I think points to something very clearly, is the Iranian people are nothing like the regime. I know a few countries in the world whose leaders and its people are more different. The Iranian people are not seeking to be a regional hegemonic power. They're not seeking to sponsor terrorism. In fact, there's a lot of pressure inside of Iran among people arguing with all the problems they have at home. Why are they spending all this money on Shia militias and terrorists and Hezbollah and helping Hamas and building terrorist networks in the West Bank? So ideally, that's the world we'd love to live in. And if that opportunity presents itself, who wouldn't take it? What we can't have is a world in which Iran has unlimited resources to continue to sponsor terrorism, build towards nuclear capability, and build these long-range rockets and missiles that they now have and have developed just in the last few years that threaten not just Israel and the entire region. But
so there you have it. That's Marco Rubio back when he was a senator, but really showing some real clarity on the issue. That, as he put it, he said, "I don't know of another country with a greater disconnect between the population and the people who are ruling them." And we've talked about this also in terms of Islam in our previous updates, that the Iranian people are really anti the regime. So this fear mongering about how they might, if a Western power intervenes, it could make the people rally around the regime is just absolutely absurd. If anything, the rage against the regime is only getting more significant, despite the fact that so many of the protesters are being killed and being attacked by the regime forces. That has not deterred them at all from continuing the protests. In fact, the protests, it seems, thank God, are only getting bigger. So let's take a look at some of the protest footage we have here. And this really, you can really see what's happening on the streets in Iran. Take a look at that. Death to the dictator. That's what they're saying there. Streets are just filled end to end. You know, it doesn't look like any of this is ending anytime soon. In fact, it only looks like it's ramping up. You know, take a look at the flyers. This is all footage from the last couple of days. It really is amazing, no matter how much they've been put down and they've been shot at. And what's also come out the last couple of days is actual footage of the regime forces shooting at people. So there's a couple citizens with their cameras, with their phones, who are filming these protesters running away. And what you're going to see in this video, watch carefully, what you're going to see in this video is then regime forces pull up and start actually shooting at people. So this is real footage of live fire of protesters being fired upon by regime forces. Take a look at this incredible video. These protesters running away. Here come the regime forces. There they are firing at. And yet the protests continue. They continue to be very large. Here's another piece of footage. Also, here what you're going to see in this one is the regime forces up here on this upper floor firing live fire, and it was slowed down so you could see it, live fire into a crowd of protesters. Have a look. Right there. So they are opening fire on the protesters. We are seeing that. We're seeing that everywhere now. And look, the world is waiting to see what President Trump is going to do. There are more and more indications that he is going to take action. And I cannot stress enough how misguided it is for those in the J.D. Vance camp in the administration to be talking about, going back into negotiations. If this ends with the regime remaining in power because the Americans stepped in and negotiated with the regime so that they could retain their power, which would essentially throw the Persian people under the bus for who knows how long, it would result in the deaths and incarceration of so many people. And as Marco Rubio said in that Meet the Press interview that we played a little earlier, the whole lifeblood of this regime is the ideology of taking down Israel, destroying America, destroying the West. That's what they invest their money in. If they wanted to survive by giving their people a better life, instead of funding militias and terrorists all over the region, all over the world, they would have done that a long time ago. There is no way to make an accommodation with this regime that will mean that it will suddenly become a moderate, peaceful actor that will care more about the peace and prosperity of its people than about jihad. So, this is a real moment of truth for President Trump. And, we need to spread the word about what's actually happening in Iran and pray for the people of Iran and pray for President Trump to make the right decision.